Welcome back to the Pair Program. I'm your host, Tim Winkler, joined by my co-host, Sean Leahy. Sean, we just went through this daylight savings time this past weekend. I feel like it's always like that magical time of the year when the entire country just suddenly becomes a time policy expert. You know, everyone has this strong opinion on it. Like people will love it, people that hate it. Where do you kind of stand on the subject?
Well, there's no excuse. It happens every year at the exact same time. I mean, that's the whole point of it, right? So, I mean, your cell phone auto updates, maybe you have to change your wristwatch, or if you have like an old digital alarm clock. But I don't think it's just like people forgetting to pay their taxes in April. I mean, it's kind of the same thing every year. But yeah, you're right. There's people always become these experts, and then all of a sudden, people start getting mad at farmers for some reason. Yeah, it's a crazy time, but you know what? I feel like we're going to experience this again in 2027. You know, that's my hot take, and my prediction for 2027 is that daylight savings will happen again.
It will happen again. It's like Groundhog Day. Yeah, I personally got like a love-hate with it. You know, I love the extra hour of daylight. But then, trying to put a 3-year-old to bed when her room's completely all lit up, it is a bit challenging. So my position is if we keep daylight saving, the caveat would be that government provides, all the parents with some blackout shades. That'd be ideal.
All right. You can write your congressman. That'll get some votes.
Yeah, that'll get some votes, I'm sure. Cool. Well, speaking of time changes, it feels at the moment like technology is going through its own kind of version of daylight savings right now. Everything's speeding up, especially around AI, new models, new startups, new capabilities popping up, very regularly, almost on a weekly basis. But the real challenge isn't, building the technology. It's integrating it into real operations. And that challenge gets even harder when we're talking about, deploying this into government environments, as we've talked about at length on the podcast. So today's episode is all about how technology actually scales in government, and why some of the more successful companies that we've seen often evolve from services rolling into software platforms along the way. And to unpack that, we've got two excellent guests joining us today. First off, we've got Darren Kimura, CEO of AI Squared. Darren and his team are tackling one of the biggest problems in enterprise AI today, which is the last mile problem. Their platform focuses on embedding AI directly into operational workflows so organizations can move beyond pilots and actually scale adoption. Darren, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
Nice. And alongside Darren is Dr. Abir Ray, founder and CEO of Expression. Abir founded Expression. I had to fact check this back in 97. And has spent nearly 3 decades building software and data platforms for some of the most complex missions across the Department of Defense and national security community. Abir, thanks for joining us as well.
Oh, no, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. And what I love about our format, right, is that we've got two perspectives, joining us on how innovation, happens in this ecosystem, one from kind of the AI platform side, one from mission engineering, GovCon side. And so I'm looking forward to it. We'll obviously get more into the thick of it. But before we dive into the main discussion, we've got a little tradition here on the Pair Program, a little warm up that we call Pair Me Up. So we go around the room, we spitball 2 things that just go well together. Sean, why don't you lead us off?
Yeah, I'm coming in hot today with a technical pairing and one with a strong opinion behind it as well. My pairing today is AI and the terminal. So I've been a terminal maximalist my entire life, right? Where I think that if you can't use the command line and you're deep into technology, you're lacking a critical skill there. And that GUIs mostly just kind of gum everything up. And since the release of Claude Code, which everyone is using now to vibe code, their own version of Salesforce or whatever, people have been like relearning the terminal and falling back in love with it because it really is powerful and you can use all sorts of different tools and skills. So I think that the future of technology is at some level, some degree, a return to the past and getting back deep into the terminal is the perfect pairing for AI.
Yeah, man. I like that. Get a little technical, get a little deep on it. I personally have been able to like troubleshoot things that I never would have been able to do. So like going deep into command lines in my computer on just troubleshooting some networking issues I've had. I work out of the garage sometimes. We've got these little modular antennas that connect from the house over to the garage. They went down, and AI just kind of helped me troubleshoot things. It would have taken me forever, probably, or getting a consultant out here to help out. But I like where your head's at with that. It's spot on for the theme of what we talk about in here as well.
Oh yeah.
Cool. I'll jump in. Not technical at all. Very different. My pairing this week is bike rides and proud parenting moments. So my daughter, Alice, just turned 3. Just kind of starting to figure out how to ride her little bike. We got her one of these little balance bikes to start, so no pedals yet. And since it's been nicer out, we've been going out around the block. She gets her bike, puts her little stuffy in her basket. She's got a little bell on the handlebar she rings. And it's one of these moments where I can see her each time, getting progressively more and more comfortable, and just getting a little faster and more confident. And I stand back and just kind of have this moment of a proud dad watching her learn. So she'll go like 10 feet, without wobbling or putting her feet down. And then I'm in the background kind of acting like she just won the Tour de France, just real big accomplishments at this point. But it's one of those, small but big things, as a parent, watching your kid learn to ride a bike. So I'm going to go with bike rides and proud parenting moments for
this is a very good snapshot of some of the dichotomies in the pair program. We have Tim over here being a fantastic father and sharing moments of importance in raising his daughter, and then me just yelling about terminals. So kind of some different perspectives for sure, but I think it works out in the end.
You're spot on, man. Let's pass it around to our guest, Darren. Quick intro and your pairing.
Sure. So I'm Darren Kimura. I'm the chief executive of AI Squared. We bring AI infrastructure into operationalized environments. So we focus on things like data readiness, governance, user experience, etc. Clearly, you both are very, very good at this pairing thing. I'm a novice at it, but the one that comes to my mind is perfect weather and pollen. We're now kind of getting into the longer days, as you mentioned at the beginning here, and wanting to experience it, spend the time outdoors. Yet, at least here in the Bay Area where I live, this is also when pollen becomes like a really big thing. Cars become coated with pollen absolutely everywhere. So at least for me, I've got allergies to the pollen. You really can't spend as much time outdoors as you would like, which may be a good thing. Now with vibe coding taking off, it allows me, or forces me, for that matter, to spend more time indoors. And I would just comment on the concept of the daylight savings thing. I'm originally from Hawaii, and Hawaii is one of the states that does not observe daylight savings. So for me, it was a little tricky, having to make that adjustment. And unfortunately, I do have a lot of those clocks that are manual and whatnot. So,
I hear that.
But it is what it is.
Yeah, the pollen is a problem. It's one of those things around here too, where like today's a great example where we're staring at a 80-degree day almost, and kind of like this false hope that it's truly here. I've hold off intentionally on bringing out any like patio furniture or deck furniture just because I know it's coming. There's going to be a thick coat of pollen that's just going to cover everything. So we usually wait off until a little bit later and then bring it out. But you got to get that Claritin, and you got a healthy Claritin dosage that you're sticking to at this time of year.
Not yet, but I have a Costco membership for that very reason to get my Claritin ready. Yes,
love it.
Costco levels of Claritin. Outstanding.
Yeah, necessary. Good stuff. Well, again, thanks for joining us, Darren. And Abir, quick intro and your pairing.
Sure. I'm the CEO of a company called Expression. We're private equity backed, based in the DC area, provide AI-driven intelligence solutions for the Department of Defense and other government organizations. My perfect pairing would be autonomy and manual labor. Anthropic put out this like graph on jobs that they feel like won't be overtaken by the recent wave of AI. So in there, being a plumber, an electrician, teaching piano, et cetera, et cetera. So this is assuming that Elon Musk, doesn't build as Optimus or whatever his humanoid robot is. Probably 20 years from now. Before is that like FSD is like he's always like 20 years late on things. But yeah, I mean, to me, it's really interesting. Like growing up, it was always become an engineer. Go into like analytically based career sets because those will always be protected. Nothing's going to replace those skills and the human mind. And now we're at a point in time where that's not really true, right? I mean, those are the most easily replaceable vocations, and then things that require like actual manual manipulation are the ones that are most likely to survive whatever is going to happen over the next couple of years.
Yeah, it's such a hot topic. It's something that we're obviously, we do a lot of talent on our side, and so always kind of dialed into, where are going to be those where those opportunities going to be that are AI proof or a little less vulnerable. And it's folks building things with their hands. Folks that are getting into the nitty gritty of a lot of mechanical types of roles and electrical and stuff like that. But yeah, it's definitely something that everybody's kind of dialed into, and it's a good pairing, man. I think it's spot on. A lot of things that folks are concerned about, but also understanding like how can it also level them up, but without elimination entirely. So, well, good stuff. Yeah, good pairings all around. Let's jump into the main discussion here. So today we're going to explore three main themes. First, kind of where innovation actually kind of starts inside some of these different government missions. I want to talk a little bit about how companies evolve from services into scalable software platforms, and then what it really takes to move from pilots and prototypes into real operational adoption, kind of solving this last mile problem in AI deployment. So let's kind of kick things off with the mission side. Abir, let's start with you. And the way I kind of wanted to start this and have it flow was give us a little bit of context, give our listeners a quick overview of what it is that you're building at Expression and the types of missions that you're supporting. And then we can kind of follow on from there for some other questions.
Yeah, sure. So, here at Expression, we focus on the ints. So if you're in the government market, you'd know what that means. So there are the varied intelligence subdomains. For about the last 20 years, we've really supported SIGINT, which is signal intelligence. So anything and everything to do with the spectrum. We built one of the first iterations of a battle management system for the DoD to handle spectrum management globally for the U.S. military and spectrum operations. And we took a lot of that base and we built out we have an agentic AI platform. Everyone has an agentic AI platform these days. Ours is specifically focused on the intelligence market. So, we take in signal intelligence data, make sense of it, help operators with cognitive fatigue, looking at all this information coming in worldwide, making sense of what they're seeing, and then giving them options. We do that in the human intelligence side. If you ever have a security clearance, our platform is actually utilized to perform human intelligence across the whole DoD industrial base. So actively, our agents are looking at your financial information, your travel records, who you're connecting with, communication, who's in your, who's in your circle, who's in their circle, how far are you removed, from bad actors, et cetera, to be able to make continuous evaluation on your worthiness, for your security clearance. We do that across, supply chain risk management, for the DoD. Really in all these places where, there's a large volume of information needs to be analyzed, needs to be, you need to make sense of it and then understand how it relates with your mission set, those are the places that we tend to excel.
Nice. So just from a, kind of like a bird's eye view here, your perspective specifically when it comes to, AI innovation, let's just say inside government environments, where do you kind of see, these real operational problems typically start to surface?
Well, I mean, a lot of the issues are the foundational models aren't quite ready yet, right? So if you're talking about warfighter functions, we're still behind fully like autonomous decision making, decision support. If you hallucinations, you have biases in training. Most of these models are trained off of a lot of open source and maybe not so open source data, and so the problems we see are that those models are only as good as the data they're trained on, and only as good as the scale they can be utilized at. There are emergent properties in AI. I also am a professor at Cornell University, so actually I teach a lot of this to my students. Emergent properties that we don't understand, but that all has to do with both scale and good information coming in. And so on the government side, that's a huge issue when you're using it in warfighting functions. You have to be able to guarantee that those pieces exist. So there's a lot of AI human teaming still speeding up things, but the human in the loop is going to be there for a bit until we solve those problems.
Yeah, and I want to pull on those threads a little bit later on here in the conversation. I want to quickly, pivot over to Darren and do the same with you. Just for AI Squared, give the listeners a little bit more of a detailed overview of the platform and the problem that you're solving, and then I've got a follow up for you.
Sure, absolutely. So our company was started by a group of NSA technologists. So they had initially developed the technology at the NSA. What they were trying to do is create a secure environment to be able to deploy models, at that time, machine learning models predominantly, process highly sensitive information, generate summaries, and then move the reports around in a secure way. And that, for all intents and purposes, became AI Squared. So what we do today is we take our data platform, we connect it to all the different sources of data an organization might have, and it could be any varied sources of data from, things like Databricks or Snowflake, into S3 buckets, or even into SaaS applications. We ingest that, bring it back into our platform. In our platform, you can run traditional foundational models, but also bring your own models. In some cases, our customers have created their own fine-tuned models or even small language models. You create workflows within our platform, and you connect those into things like governance modules, which review policies. Maybe it's NIST, maybe it's some FARs, it could be HIPAA, or whatever the applicable policy governance that you're trying to observe is. And that allows you to ensure that the results coming from those models are compliant. And then we also add on some additional capabilities, such as things like masking. So we can hide PII, for example, personally identifiable information. We have feedback loops where we can actually observe how people are interacting with the results and incorporate that into tuning the model for the next version, improving the model. So the models are constantly learning and getting better. So that's what we do. And then what we do at the very last mile is we take the insights, and sometimes they're dashboards, widgets, charts, graphs. Sometimes they're just like chat queries and results. And we can create UIs, dashboards for our end users, or more importantly, we can put them into applications that they already have. So in the case of the Department of War work that we do, a lot of this is augmenting dashboards they're already using. Perhaps they're using some existing dashboard, Tableau, a click dashboard, and they want to get a little bit more information. What we can do is we can actually augment the window that they're in. We slide all the information from that particular dashboard to the side. And on the other side, we actually have the AI generated information. And that's going to be context aware. So it's going to understand the information on that screen, but it's going to pull data from other sources, a bunch of randomized sources, run it through the models, and then surface the information so that you can have a little bit more context, a little bit more information about whatever it is you're taking a look at. So it gives that user a lot more power, a lot more information, and then the ability to interact with the data. You can ask the data questions, you can chat with your data, dive in a little bit deeper than what you see in that particular widget by itself.
Quick shout out to our sponsor, Defense Unicorns. This one's for the problem solvers out there. They're hosting Warhacker, a first of its kind hackathon built for the defense community. No buzzwords, no slide decks, just hands on keyboard solving real mission problems with real code. You'll be side by side with developers, engineers, and innovators from across government, industry, nonprofits, and academia, all hacking for the warfighter. It's happening June 16th through the 19th in San Diego. Got a real world problem to solve or want to join a team that does? Learn more at defenseunicorns.com/hatchit. Yeah, it's very cool. I want to kind of pull a bit on that last mile problem that you touch on there with, this gap between, building the models and then actually deploying them into these real workflows. What are some of the biggest obstacles that you kind of see, when organizations are trying to, operationalize some of that AI?
Yeah, the biggest one that we see is when you're building one workflow for one end use application. A lot of times what we find is organizations will try to stitch it together themselves. And in many cases, there's no roadmap for them to follow. So they're doing it by trial and error. They're trying a bunch of different tools. And the problem with that, so over time, you'll get it to work. You'll figure out the right tools. You'll be able to make things connect. You'll be able to write the code between each of the different components. And now you have, a viable workflow. The challenge with that is that it's not a durable workflow. So what we have seen over time is as SDKs change, or perhaps APIs change, or data in the APIs change, the workflow itself becomes unreliable, and in some cases they could even break. And the challenge there is then you have to go back and figure out how you constructed that original workflow. And in some cases, the person who built them, they may not be around anymore. they may have forgotten. There's no documentation because they were building it on the fly, and as a result, it's hard to replicate it. It's hard to fix it. It's hard to basically it erodes trust at the end of the day because the end user is no longer confident in that particular workflow. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to institutionalize it with SLAs. With digital twins to ensure that we can test environments before things drop. So that way it's not going to actually impact the end user in the real world production environment, and make sure that they're always up. So we're instrumenting that entire workflow from end to end with agents to be able to provide alerting and monitoring. So if anything does drop, we can get on it right away and bring it back up as quickly as we can.
So, Darren, Abir, you'll find out pretty quickly that I function as Tim's live GPT for some of these episodes, right? Where I'm constantly ingesting context. And a theme that I've detected already is cognitive load and human in the loop. You actually both use those terms. And I think that we're seeing with this sort of AI revolution that the speed and velocity of development of software applications, of models, both new large language models and more traditional machine learning models, is incredibly quick, and you can get access to a ton of data and you can analyze that data now faster than you've ever been able to do it before. But is it actually leading to faster or better decision making? Because ultimately, especially in the realms that you're operating in, highly classified, defense and intelligence related, there's always going to be a human in the loop. I mean, Abir, you said that in some of your initial remarks, is that there's going to be a human in the loop for at least the foreseeable future. In your experience, has there been any sort of like cognitive overload that you've seen in deploying these workflows and other agentic solutions where the human in the loop is actually now also the bottleneck? And I'll start by directing that back to Abir, but then kind of the same question for Darren after Abir's comments.
Yeah, no, we have seen, right? So, some of the kind of structural problems in the federal government, tends to be the training of the workforce or the composition of the workforce. So we have a cyber use case that are in the process of deploying DHS wide. So there's something called a Security Operations Center, or SOC, And so our agentic platforms taking in data from these SIEM providers, Splunk, Elastic, CrowdStrike, et cetera. And then, looking at that, looking at the events of interest and building patterns of life, from those events, like at a very pared down level to push this to SOC analysts. A lot of the SOCs are manned by junior analysts. And so, they're unfamiliar with understanding, what patterns, might be a precursor to a larger cyber attack or what have you. And so the AI is able to understand those patterns of life very quickly, right? And determines, these five events actually equate to a certain pattern of life. And then, that's being repeated hundreds of times. So, danger, danger. And those junior SOC analysts, because of cognitive overload, this is, one of, terabytes of data coming in daily. Even though the AI is able to alert them to it, a human has to then action some sort of defensive measure or what have you, and they're still being overloaded, right? And the AI, our AI is prioritizing what's the most critical risk to infrastructure, especially on the cyber physical side. And still, the personnel don't have the personnel to be able to action that off the AI. So you still need to have humans that are well trained that and enough of them get in the flow of this information in your domain.
Yeah, that's. I also like that you specifically kind of pointed out some of the more junior folks, right? If you're more mid-level or senior, you'd have developed some muscle memory and some tacit knowledge. But if you're just starting out, you're still getting your head wrapped around things, and you have these AI agents that are just kind of outpacing you. Darren, I wonder if you want to jump in here with similar perspectives on what you've seen.
Yeah, so I think this is all use case specific, in my opinion, anyway, because I can see situations where you will have more cognitive overload, like the SOC scenario. I see a lot more, at least in the work that we do, where it's the other way around. We're actually we're providing like cognitive relief. And I'll give you an example of what I mean there. So in our work, we do a lot of work in governance. And a lot of times what happens is, in order for you to be truly applying the appropriate governance, you have to be using the state of the art, the latest and greatest policy documents. So it could be, starting from a NIST, standard, but then there could be a series of memos that have come after that, which provide additional guidance and restrictions on directions or rules or applications, whatever the case may be. And where we help is with the analyst who's responsible to review policies that are coming out from a particular department. And they need to be compliant with all the other departments that relate to that particular subject matter. It's hard for one person to know that without using AI. AI allows them to very quickly review or write something, a document, for example, and the AI has within its corpus of knowledge all of the related governance materials that it should be scanning against. So as you're writing, or even after you've completed a report and you run a scanner against it, it can instantaneously highlight areas where, yes, this is green, great, very compliant. This is yellow, perhaps something you should look into, and footnote it. Click on the footnote, go to the sidebar, see exactly why it could be questionable, or perhaps even red, where, yes, this is just wrong. And AI can actually help suggest us, alternatives, rewording, for example, to make sure it's not as ambiguous for that particular user. So this allows that analyst to be able to process a lot more information, a lot more quickly, and a lot more accurately.
So this is really interesting. I'm glad that we kind of did it in that order, because I think that, my initial takeaway is for agencies, organizations, federal, but also corporations commercially, when you're trying to find ways to deploy AI, obviously there's a lot of different landmines out there to avoid, but so much of it is understanding a cognitive loading or a cognitive deloading, right? And so, and what Abir pointed out, that could be some cognitive loading that you're going to have your workforce be ready for, be trained up on, what have you. Whereas Darren, from your experiences there's also ways in other use cases where you can cognitively deload. So for tech leaders out there, it's, easy problem, right? Just completely understand top to bottom your problem space. but just that's interesting stuff that you don't really see in a lot of the kind of normal commentary on AI deployment. But Tim, I think I'm going to push it back to you, and you can keep us oriented here.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of jump into this theme that we've been seeing a bit more and more of in the ecosystem, which is kind of moving from services into scalable software platforms, and not really moving entirely from services, still keeping services, but tacking on and adding on, a software platform to your, all-in-one solution, if you will. Abir, maybe I'll kick things off with you. With the platform or the tool that you all have been building. What were the patterns across the programs that you were supporting that made you realize that it was time to build a product rather than continuing purely as services? Was there, certain patterns that you were kind of picking up on that said this would be, a much better outlet for us?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it is a lot of the government problems are, within like one or two classes of general problems, right? You look at, especially on the Department of War side, you have a lot of legacy systems that have been stovepiped, but they support a domain. They're you need to bring them into a single context, right? So via the Accenture, the Deloitte way would be to bring into a data lake, what have you, but you still don't have semantic understanding, right? So a lot of what we've done in the domains we've worked in is take that disparate data, bring but they all support a single domain, and then we give it semantic understanding, and once you do that, actually, deploying agents becomes quite easy. We see like kind of in the old consulting model, you're bringing the data lake here, and then you're doing RPA. But really, in today's world, right, and given the power of the foundational AI models, really what you're looking to do is, bringing that data into some context where you have semantic understanding, and then, giving it access, giving those foundational models access, whether through agents or, or directly, to be able to expose that knowledge base, back to the operators. And then, once you do that piece, then you look at all these different problems that exist in a domain, and they're very self-similar. On the Intel side, it's, am I, targeting? Am I trying to figure out a pattern of life? And you're repeating that whether you're in cyber, whether you're in, signals intelligence, whether you're in human intelligence. And so, though, you could do kind of anything and everything in the agentic lane. We've stuck with where we as a company have done well traditionally, and then just doubled down on the AI piece.
Yeah, it sounds like a certainly repeatable, just different domains and program areas. And then I guess, Darren, on your side, maybe approaching this a little bit from a different angle in terms of like embedding AI insights directly into these existing applications and these workflows. Why does kind of like where AI shows up matter so much, for adoption?
Yeah, and I'd like to maybe take a stab at the previous question as well, because I think our journey was interesting, and it may not be that dissimilar to other listeners to this podcast. So we started off basically focusing on building technology through SIBRs and sitters. And we did over 10 different government grants. And really the goal was to create a bunch of technologies that could be scalable and usable in an ideal dual use kind of environment. So based on that, you would think that we would have ended up with a really great technological product that could be highly replicable in its use and scaled from that going forward. What we realize, though, in the reality of it is that AI is very, very immature in everything that it is. I mean, we've seen foundation models continue to mature real time before our eyes, and the environments that are where we're trying to deploy these systems are not AI friendly. They're not easy to deploy AI in it yet. And again, as I mentioned previously, there's not really like a playbook yet that allows you to just do this, then that, and equals success. I think those things will come through maturity, but they're not there yet. So what we found is that as a technology company, we had to become a little bit more of a services company, where as we're bringing AI into these very different IT organizations. They're constructed in completely different ways. They have a bunch of different tools that don't talk. They have systems that don't recognize each other. Even authentication is difficult in these environments. And we actually have to go in and kind of build the connectors. We become a little bit more services like. Now we try to always do that in a software way where we're not trying to sell, professional consulting hours. We're definitely not trying to become like a Deloitte or a Booz or anything like that. But that's required in order for you to have the successful deployment of AI. And what we're finding is that even within those organizations, and I think this is maybe the answer to the latter question, you still have to fine tune these models. The foundation models are great, but they're very generic. They won't provide information that will specifically address how the organization is functioning today or the types of decisions that they're making. And in fine tuning those models, we can actually help kind of fit the model to the way they work, as opposed to making them work to the way that the model thinks. And that's a lot more adaptable for them. So what we found in doing that is that you get a lot more buy-in a lot faster because they're not changing their workflows. The models are changing for them. So we're bringing AI into their existing environment.
I think, Darren, that's hit on something that's really important because there's some historical antecedents to it. In years past, if you wanted to bring a new technology to the federal world, you couldn't just show up with it and say, hey, isn't this a cool new technology? You had to understand their mission. You understand their pain points. And if you didn't do that, you were never really going to get traction. And what you've just outlined is kind of the AI version of that, which is you can't just show up with a couple of like Claude skills and just throw it at whatever data that exists in an agency. You really have to understand how their organization works, how their organization thinks, and then, of course, the mission sets that they're executing. And to then craft these AI systems that are actually going to be useful. So I like that you were honest there and said that, AI does a lot of things really well, but also it's still pretty immature. And there's some things that it doesn't do well that an experienced practitioner can call out immediately. But you have to build these human machine interactions effectively. If you don't, it's not going to go well.
Oh, go ahead, Darren. If you're,
I was just going to agree. I mean, that's a great way to summarize it. I think that's where we are in the maturity. I think as we, as society become much more comfortable with it and we begin to, adapt it more into the way we go about doing our business, things can change, but that is definitely where I see it today. That's definitely where we see the Department of War today.
Yeah, I mean, I could just speak, firsthand from, supporting some of these efforts from a talent perspective. And you're looking at these government systems that are, decades old, still, mission critical. But the idea of, rebuilding them entirely just seems unrealistic versus augmenting them. Seems like a much more practical approach. Obviously, moving faster as well. If you can enhance that existing infrastructure instead of replacing it. I wanted to kind of ask though, like on this kind of, this theme that we're kind of seeing, you've seen companies like, Palantir also build hybrid models, part platform, part services, kind of deeply embedded with the customer. Is that kind of the future of GovTech companies? Do we start to feel like that's going to be what the majority of these types of companies look like? Is this hybrid model moving forward?
In part, right? I mean, the Palantir model is interesting because Foundry was largely a collection of different tools that forward deployed engineers built, and you needed engineers to configure them for use, right? I mean, even to today, you need those engineers to nothing that Palantir does is out of the box. So you need those forward deployed engineers to configure things, to build data pipelines, to build ontology, and then you need them to operate, right? So it is really a services company, masked as a SaaS company. I think with the foundational AI model providers, with this, it would just be like a Gen 4, Gen 5 of programming languages, right? So like back in the day, I'm old enough where I loved fractals as a kid, and I actually built and I didn't have a computer with a math coprocessor. So this is really back in the day. So to generate a fractal, I built my own assembly library to do fixed point math that you could use your registers on your CPU to quickly run through. So I had to understand how the registers worked and the underlying properties of my CPU. But now, with with Claude Code, what have you, you can largely make natural language prompts, and then it interpolates that into code that then becomes an application. Eventually, it'll just be the natural language that goes directly to your program, right? So it'll create behind the scenes machine code that someone uses, and then when that happens, I think the model is going to be very different, because you can have a different application every day of the week. You can make those modifications, as you like. You're not stuck with, your Salesforce or your Foundry or what have you. As long as the data exists somewhere, you can, build. Everyone can, the four of us could, be in the same domain, but have a customized application to our liking, and the O&M and everything on that is low because the model's generating all that for you. And to me, that's actually the future. You won't see what you see today. This is sort of this is the hybrid state, right? And the future state is that you prompt the model for whatever you need. It generates a UI that's most suitable to you, and that's how you interact with data and operations in the future.
So, Abir, you're speaking my language here. I started off the episode talking about CLIs and terminals, and now you're talking about, writing your own, basically compiler. It sounded like back in the day. So this is fantastic, and I completely agree with and love your idea of characterizing, these large language models as generation 4 programming languages, right? You can think of an LLM as a compiler that doesn't have syntax errors, right? You throw in natural language or even incomplete natural language. I always notice that my spelling gets worse when I'm talking to Claude. But I'm gonna not push back here, but I'm gonna play devil's advocate. I'm gonna red team this a little bit, which is, I can now use natural language to develop dashboards, interesting data analysis, and even like full scale applications to my heart's content. But if I'm mischaracterizing the problem, or if I have like a flawed ontological understanding of what I'm looking at, if I don't really have a good kind of source of truth, is there a danger in the feeling that I'm like gathering insights and making better decisions versus the reality of I'm kind of going down a rabbit hole of my own making?
So critical thinking always has a premium in life, right? I think for
I was hoping you wouldn't say that. That's not good news for me.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Continue, Abir.
You're sure.
No. So there's a time there. There are all these great memes about programmers. Back in the day, you'd be in applied math or a physicist and go into programming. Computer science became its own domain, and properly trained computer scientists, have a lot of critical thinking skills. Very defined understanding of logic. Predicate logic, Boolean algebra, so on and so forth. And then we came to an era where programming was relatively easy, and you could go to a code camp or what have you, and and understand how to program. I think we're sort of coming full circle back, where when this fourth generation programming language via the LLM truly is viable, then critical thinking skills, how you deconstruct problems, how you understand decomposition of problems is effectively prompt engineering, right? The better you can decompose a problem, the better you can generate prompts, the better the LLM can build for you. Eventually, there will be guardrails, so you can be like very lazy, like I need a dashboard to tell me how the weather is going to be for the net and whatever, right? But that's still far off in the future. The compute that requires is fairly extreme, at least based on how models work today. So we're going to have a golden era of critical thinking and decomposition. Decomposing problems, defining problems, and that will be sort of the next era of the software engineer, right? Those who can do that, will be able to leverage this tool to its full benefit. And you probably have organizations, instead of having forward deployed engineers, you'll have these, thought leaders in domains that can, can take a domain understanding along with, critical thinking, bring that together, and then they provide the guardrails to your rank and file, and that is, I guess, sort of like, the hybrid model, but even more specialized.
Yeah.
So, as a professor, is this something that you're bringing into, your coursework? Is like focusing in a lot on critical thinking?
Well, so I was probably the last class of people to get their PhD before, like, everyone used AI, and I had to teach. So during, your PhD, you're forced to teach. You're an indentured servant to the university that you obtain your doctorate from. And so as I started teaching, post PhD, I do it like, on Mondays, 2 graduate courses at Cornell. I started noticing, like my students using AI to answer problems, and it's spy versus spy, right? So how do I generate problems that require critical thinking that you can't prompt completely, right? Like you need some context and understanding, or the AI is going to give you gobbledygook. And it's something I teach both directly, right? Like, hey, like I'm giving you problems that won't produce the appropriate answer if you just take the PDF and jam it into Claude or into ChatGPT. And it's sort of, in a backhanded way, teaching these guys to critically think. They're from a generation now where they've gotten to use AI to solve most of their homework. They're not learning foundational skills, and so when they get to the graduate level, they're really at a loss, right? They had COVID, now they have AI, so they have just this huge gap, and it's a problem on how to teach them to think critically, where they didn't interact socially for 4 years, with others, and now they have the easy button. We used to have Cliff Notes, right? Cliff Notes were sort of great, but you still had to read them. So instead of a 300-page document, you had a 50-page document, but you still had to read those 50 pages, and you still had to write your own essay. And they don't have any of that. I think it's a problem for educators, by and far, because kids are very industrious, and they're able to use AI to probably, you could do a year's worth of schooling in a week's worth of time, right? And get straight A's. So
it's such a good point. Yeah, it's such an important point you bring up. It's actually something I think would be a great episode that we craft. Get a couple of professors, maybe get you on a repeat episode here for a future episode on critical thinking, Abir, because I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think it's just, I love the easy button analogy because it's so true. Darren, I want to kind of wrap a little bit of this main conversation and lean into, scaling, because this is something where we get a lot of early stage founders that join as listeners here, and building something, especially if we're talking about dual use and they're trying to, maybe break something into, these more regulated industries, if it be defense, national security, or what have you. Going from that, that prototype or that pilot into, real operational scale. Kind of talked a little bit about it, but maybe just reiterate a little bit on, when organizations are trying to, move from that, prototype phase, what typically kind of breaks, or where do you see like these biggest bottlenecks, if it's integration, organizational readiness, can you just expand a little bit more on that?
Yeah, happy to do that. And just a comment on the previous topic. So I'm a PhD student. So not
nice.
a kid, but much later. I've got another year or so to go.
Where are you doing your PhD?
I'm at Claremont Graduate University on the West Coast in LA,
amazing.
the LA area. Yeah. So it's funny to hear the other side of the argument because as a student, I get to be the beneficiary of some of the advanced technologies, and don't have to read the 50-page Cliff Notes anymore. So it's really interesting topic.
You just teed us up for the next episode. Then we already got this. We'll bring both of you guys back.
We can go again. So I will say with regards to moving into the production, crossing the cavern, if you will, and trying to go from pilot to production, it is very, very tricky because the different environments have different requirements and different organizations also have different expectations. What I would probably say is some of the areas we see things typically fall apart is a couple things, I guess, that come to my mind. And these are more maybe just observations and perhaps even some tips. But when you move into the production, the pilot environment's pretty easy. Pretty much anything goes. You're in a lab. You're not connected to any production workloads. If something goes wrong, you're not going to really harm anybody. It's isolated and protected. The production environment is a completely different animal, right? If a result, if a query comes out and it's providing instructions, which particularly in the case of the Department of War, it could lead to loss of life, right? It could lead to loss of multi-millions of dollars. So having quite a bit of cycles on the technology, having the users similar to, I guess, when I think about an analogy is like Waymo learning the streets and having to be able to produce a certain amount of hours before it can actually drive on those streets autonomously. AI is very much like that. You have to be able to produce replicated, consistent results before you will have a human accept that and push it into production. So I guess the first thing that comes to my mind through my experience here is it's going to take a long time. It takes a long time to move into the production environments, the high IL environments for the Department of War, or into production environments for the enterprise. One thing that always falls apart is cybersecurity. I think that oftentimes when you're building in pilot environments, you tend to want to go very, very fast, and you tend to forget about some of the requirements that, from a cyber perspective, that you must have in the production environment, and gaining those, doing the appropriate scans, having the right technologies, which are themselves ATO, very, very different because again, they're typically expensive. They have their own requirements for implementation. I know when we moved into the production environment, I got hit by a bill that I was not expecting because we had to buy a number of different technologies that provided the minimum requirement for meeting NIST, but we didn't care about any of that in the pilot environment. Things like SBOM, producing a software bill of materials that could be reviewed line by line. That's not something you typically do in pilot environments, but you have to do that, and someone has to review that and review your open source code. And someone at the end of the day is going to be responsible for signing off on those things before it goes into production. So I think you have to be prepared for that. There are, companies that can come in, and help you. For example, pen test your software. You could have, cybersecurity reviews of your software. There are tools that can help you. But if you have never done it before, you have to probably plan for the worst, because I can tell you, again, from my own personal experience, we had thought it was going to take a particular, period of weeks to get through it. And it ended up being much, much longer than that, over 6 months to actually get through it of hard work and focus every single day to get us finally into production.
Yeah, super, super helpful feedback there. I want to, make sure I get Abir's kind of, 2 cents on this as well. And we'll then kind of wrap the main discussion and close with our final segment.
Yeah, no, I mean, to Darren's point, right? Like as we, deploy into, different DOW environments, unlike, commercial deployments, when you support the U.S. military, there are, at these different classification levels, all these cybersecurity related requirements, and a lot of them are legacy. They could use AI themselves. Darren made mention to the NIST, like the 853 standard. So those are all largely manual controls, be the risk management framework. Yet you get real-time telemetry on all your systems as well, right? So there's the opportunity for DoW or for the government to have these digital twins that could accurately describe the state of your cybersecurity posture. But all of these are again stovepiped, right? They were built independently and not with this common thread, so to speak. And because of that, there are all these like there are costs that are borne by companies like ours and Darren's because of inefficiency and lack of cohesive policy and understanding and stovepipe systems rather than what would be best practices. It's something that we probably learned from our near peers. If you go to your China, your Chinas of the world, because they control the industrial base to your military deployment, they're completely aligned. There's no daylight between what you're doing from industry out to what you're providing for military or other operations, and that capitalism is great, but that type of cohesion and having an end to end, like having people end to end work lockstep. There's a value to that we currently can't replicate, but I imagine in the next next decade we're going to have to get to, because those inefficiencies are where our adversaries, right, can take advantage of us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said. I had some other questions, so I'm gonna pause on it because I know that we're running up against the hour mark, and we want to have some fun with this last segment. So I'm gonna put a bow on the main conversation. I think we got a lot accomplished with the time that we had, and we'll segue into the 5-second scramble. So this is a fun one. This is rapid fire Q&A. Kind of say the first thing that comes to mind. Try to keep it within 5 seconds. It'll be some business, some personal, not too personal. Sean, why don't you lead us off with Darren, and then I'll close with the beer.
Happy to. All right, Darren. 5-second scramble. Easy. We'll start out with the first question. What is something about the culture at AI Squared that you want everyone to know about?
Fun. Do you want me to elaborate?
Great.
Or is that good?
Great answer. Great answer. Less than a second, 3 letters. Outstanding. Because AI Squared is a fun culture, what are some of the roles that you are hiring for currently or plan to in the immediate future? This is so that some of our listeners who might be interested and excited about working with you know what you're looking for.
All of them. In the simplest answer, sales, technical, data science, we're hiring pretty much across the board. Yes.
Okay. Outstanding. All right. What's the best decision that you've made under serious time pressure?
Wow. Serious time pressure? I don't think I've ever made a great decision under serious time pressure, honestly.
Valid answer. Valid answer. What's a skill that you thought was useless when you learned it, but it turned out to be very valuable later on in your career?
I think presentation skill. I never really thought having to present, in school, you have to present and all that, boring. But what I found later in my career is that that's probably the most important thing, being able to take a message, make it clear, make it efficient for a listener.
Awesome. Yeah, and very common, especially amongst more technical folks, is thinking that sort of skill, the softer skills, presentation skills, are afterthoughts. I can see Tim is grinning at that. What's a failure that taught you something that you still use today?
Resilience, I think. Oftentimes we have the best crafted plans and they never work out. But I think what you learn from that is it's how you get back up, right? And what you do with that learnings. Repeat it, that idea, learn from it, improve on it. That's what I try to do every time.
Awesome. All right, you made it through the hard part. The next couple of questions should be a little bit easier. What was your first job ever?
Electrician working for my dad.
Did he make you
Nice.
test to see if the current was still going through the sockets?
Yeah, like this.
Yeah.
No, yes. I
Old
was a guy
school.
climbing in the roofs where it's tight, and I was a kid, so I was the only one who could get up there and wire those little light fixtures at the corner of the house. Yeah.
That's a good role and task match right there. If you weren't in AI, assisting the defense world, what industry do you think you would want to disrupt?
Energy, I think it's a passion of mine. I think we have tremendous energy problems, clean energy in particular, and I'd love to continue to help figure out a way to solve that problem.
Great.
Very top of mind right now.
What's your go-to stress food or stress drink when you're deep into a project, when you've got a deadline coming up, it's midnight? What do you go to the fridge to get to keep you running?
Oh, chips. I'm a big chips guy. Any bag of chips I can find, I'm eating it. And all of it.
Do you have a flavor? Do you have a favorite chip flavor?
Yeah, throw your favorite out.
Personal. Guys, I love
Question.
Fritos, the artificial everything types of chips.
Yeah.
Yes. Spicy hot.
Oh yeah, very, very, very popular. Now, your best podcast or newsletter recommendation that has nothing to do with tech, because we know that would probably be the pair program. So we want to give everybody else a chance. Non-tech related podcast, newsletter that you think is that people should check out.
Well, I listen to the Journal every day. I think that they do a nice job of summarizing one big current event story, and it's very short. It's like 17 minutes, so that's my go-to.
Excellent. And then final question. It's our standard closing question for the 5-second scramble. What is a corporate philanthropy or charitable organization that's near and dear to your heart that you want our listeners to know about?
I'm a Eagle Scout, so I support the Boy Scouts of America.
Fantastic. Darren, you've crushed it. 5 for 5 on the 5-second scramble. Actually, 10 for 5 on the 5-second scramble.
Thanks.
10 for 10, actually. All right, let's jump in. Abir, you ready?
I'm ready. Let's go.
All right. If Expression were a restaurant, what would be its signature dish?
I think it'd be like a 72-hour pho that was like lovingly made by a series of grandmas in the back. You could see through like a glass pane window.
Oh, that's fantastic. It's a good visual too, soothing and a good hangover here as well.
Great for the winter.
That's right. What are some active openings that Expression is hiring for over the next 3 months?
Infrastructure engineers, AI engineers, and then BD execs. So, all parts of the sausage, right? Like making the sausage, selling the sausage, and then making sure that you quality control the sausage.
Nice. What's something that would surprise candidates about the culture at Expression?
Obviously, we're nerds, but we're competitive nerds. So we have a lot of trivia, all these other great traditions amongst the employees that are both intellectual pursuits, but bring out the best in competition.
Very cool. What's a technology trend in AI that you're most excited about right now?
I think like OpenClaw, like the ability to like kind of democratize access to agents and let people really play with anything they want to automate. So much of our lives, revolve around our computers, and there's so many opportunities for automation and letting just people play. Again, going back to my origin story, we had like TI-81s, and then a couple of us in high school made video games like that you could play across the data link cable, like a Scorched Earth and things like that. So when you give people access to that technology and you democratize that access, a lot of cool things can happen.
I didn't know if you were going to say drug wars. That was a big one on the TI-83.
Oh, absolutely.
Drug wars. All right. So who's somebody in the defense tech ecosystem that we should have on this podcast? Who's someone that you would recommend?
Um, so I was just at joint staff CDAO Harley Stout, who's the CDAO for joint staff. Is and it's a special staff section. He's ex booze, really interesting, right? Like, those guys are at the pointy head of the spear. Working both looking at all of industry's defense tech and how to then employ it, for operational use. So he's interesting. Bianca Hurlery, who used to work for me, she's the chief AI officer for joint staff. Those are the ones that come off the top of my head. But there are so many others at OSD that would be worthy to be here.
Nice. Yeah, we'll be tapping them shortly. Always love a good guest referral. Yeah. So you're a serious squash player. What's one lesson from squash that actually applies to building companies?
I think it's consistency. Like Tom Brady said it best, and I'm of course the season ticket I'm a Pats season ticket holder. Is that
nice.
To be successful in life, you don't have to be extraordinary at all, right? It's consistency, and it's the thing that others don't do, right? Being consistent day in, day out, and I find that true in business. That the most remarkable business people that I've worked with are just consistent, right? They put in that effort day in, day out. They don't take any rest days, and I see a lot of extraordinary people. I went to a high school where I think it was the number one high school in the nation at the time. Still might be in the top 4 or 5. Sorry, we just still went over my 1 hour timeline, so it's just reminding me. But consistency, right? It's true in every facet of life. Very true in squash and very true in business.
Very cool. Nice. So you balance being a founder, a professor at Cornell, family man. You kind of started here with holding a little one. What's your secret weapon for managing time?
Not sleeping. I think this as a recent father. Sleep is at a premium. I don't do a lot of caffeine either, so I drink like my go-to snack in the middle of the night. As you get older too, right? You just put on the pounds. Is sparkling water, and if you drink enough of it, it'll keep you up, or it will make you fear wetting yourself. So that's my secret weapon.
Yeah, Topo Chico is my weapon too.
So good.
It's so good.
The mouthfeel is superb.
It's the glass bottle.
I should have a podcast on the mouthfeel for the varied sparkling waters. One of my good friends during quarantine, you get really bored. And in my quarantine group, we were talking about the mouthfeel of different sparkling waters. Topo Chico came up on top.
Oh, that's awesome. We can nerd out on that.
Exactly.
All right. What was your very first car?
Toyota Tercel. It was a 4-speed. It was manual. I had saved up all summer long to buy it. My parents put in the difference of money. It was from Woodbridge, Virginia, and the dealership is the bottom of a hill. They didn't realize that it was a manual. I didn't realize what a manual car was, and so they went to drive home, and I learned via the sales guy how to get up a hill using the clutch on a 4-speed, and I learned very quickly how to drive that manual car.
Yeah, pretty sure nobody knows how to drive a manual these days anymore. So,
definitely not.
Good skill to have. And then a closer, a charity or corporate philanthropy that's near and dear to you.
Because I do a lot with squash, is the Urban Squash Program. They have deployments all across the U.S. And it's a great charity. They, urban kids come in, they learn how to play squash, underprivileged urban kids, and then they also, pair with tutors and other things. They've been great about getting these kids into college, playing on teams. Squash is a relatively privileged activity. So, as those kids go out, out to maybe potentially work at Wall Street or work for these founders. The founder of Whoop, is a $1 billion unicorn. He's ex squash player from the Harvard squash team. There are a lot of us out around there. Brian Roberts from Comcast. It provides all these opportunities, beyond just sport. They pair sport with education, with a pathway in life. So I love that charity.
That's very cool. Sounds like a valuable network to participate with, and learn little squash skills along the way. That's a wrap, guys. Abir, Darren, thank you so much for spending time with us and talking through, scaling, deploying AI across government at large. So thanks for joining us on the pod.
Thank you
Great
for
to be
having
here.
us.
Thanks, guys.